And yeah, like I said, we've got a lot to cover today. So I want to go ahead and jump in as a few more people trickle in. We'll welcome you into this space. Hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Salinas. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a program manager here at the Children and Nature Network. I am glad that you all are here. We have a great number of participants. We have about 80 people online right now and lots more people who signed up to receive the recording. So thank you for being here, being excited to learn more about early childhood and nature-based practices within early childhood systems and for supporting this work. To get us started, love to invite you to use the chat box to introduce yourself so we get an idea of who all is in this space. Feel free to introduce yourself using your name, your pronouns, your location, and the native land on which you reside. And if you feel comfortable or inspired to do so, invite you to also share one word that describes what nature access in early childhood looks like in your community right now, right? Where are you starting? How are things looking where you're at right now as we kind of jump into this toolkit on how to bring more nature access into early child care systems. All right. So I do want to start by respectfully acknowledging that I am joining you today from the unceded lands of the Tiwa people in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they've stewarded this land across many generations. New Mexico, the entire state, is also the ancestral and present-day homelands of 23 different sovereign Native nations. We invite you to share the Indigenous land history of your location in the chat with us as well. If you're not familiar with whose land you're on, you can learn more through the Native Land Map at native-land.ca. We're going to drop that link in the chat as well. And also want to just mention, right, land acknowledgements are one small step towards recognizing the Indigenous peoples whose land we live and work on. At the same time, acknowledgements alone aren't enough. So in addition to naming the land, we really encourage continued engagement and support of the Indigenous communities in your local area and, you know, across the country. You can do this by learning whose homelands you're on, educating yourself about Indigenous issues, amplifying Indigenous voices, and supporting Indigenous-led organizations and businesses. The work of working within the Indigenous community and supporting them is really an ongoing effort, and it takes ongoing learning and action as well. So if you're interested in going deeper, some organizations such as the Native Governance Center and Illuminative offer accessible resources to support you in continuing engagement beyond the moment of land acknowledgements. A few housekeeping items before we jump in. Closed captioning is enabled in this webinar. We are using a webinar format. If you would like to bring closed captioning on, you should see a button usually at the bottom of your Zoom screen, sometimes at the top or on the sides, depending on what you're using, laptop or phone. And you can click on that closed captioning button and it will bring up the captions for you to see. Because we are in webinar mode, we do also ask that if you have any questions for us along the way, you use the Q&A function on the Zoom app as well. That makes it a little bit easier for us to find those questions than the chat. The chat is open and available to all attendees, so feel free to chat with one another, to drop some comments in there along the way. But for questions, it's just a little bit easier if they're in that Q&A, then we make sure we can capture all of those. We will do a Q&A at the end of our conversation, and anything we don't get to, we will also make sure to follow up on in the follow-up email. All right, so this is where we are headed today. Like I mentioned, quite a bit to cover. We're going to begin with an overview of the updated Nature in Early Childhood Toolkit. So we'll include some information on how that toolkit is structured, how communities are using it. We're going to share a few examples from communities across the country so we can help ground that framework, the toolkit, in real life practice. Then David will provide a brief update on the outdoor and nature-based early care and education collaborative. That's that long acronym you see there, ONB ECE, on your screen. And he'll share some of the state level policy momentum that we are seeing. across the country. And then we're going to close out this section and this time together with a policy-focused panel with some of our partners from across the country who are advancing equitable access to nature in their own communities and states. And we're really looking forward to that panel. And then, like I said, we'll have a few minutes for Q&A at the very end to answer questions on the toolkit or from the panel. And we'll see, how much time we have to get through that. All right. I see lots of people dropping in to the chat where they're from. Also, just want to acknowledge that we see some San Francisco, some other people from Santa Fe. That's really exciting. From Florida here, from Colorado, from the city of Austin, from Kentucky. Wonderful. Have people from all over the country. Thank you for being with us again and for introducing yourselves. All right, so let's jump in to our toolkit. I'm going to go ahead and lead this part here as well before I pass it off to one of my colleagues I'm going to lead us through the next part of our conversation. But why are we talking about nature in early childhood? We know that the early years really lay the foundation for lifelong health and learning. Between birth and age 5, children's brains are developing faster than at any other stage in their life. And that development is shaped by their experiences and their environments. So all the research that we have supports the idea that regular access to nature during this critical period of brain development supports children's social emotional development, their executive function, their physical and mental health, as well as their school readiness. And yet we do see that in many communities, nature access during these critical years isn't consistent or it's not equitably available. And because of that, we developed the Nature in Early Childhood Toolkit. This is also formally known as the Early Childhood Nature Connections Toolkit, in case you're familiar with that. But this is kind of our updated and revamped version of that. The toolkit itself is intended to be a practical resource that's designed to support communities and cities and in integrating nature into their early childhood systems. So we're looking at outdoor learning environments, to programming, to workforce development, policy, and funding strategies, right? All across the spectrum of what is included within an early childhood system for a community. At its core, the toolkit reflects a systems level approach. It is not a single program nor a one-time intervention. It's really intended to be a way of thinking about how nature can become fully integrated into the network of programs, educators, families, community partners, and policies, right? Everything that helps to shape children's daily experiences across a community or city. And what we've learned from communities as we've done this work over the past decade and more is that lasting change really happens when we work across multiple and interconnected areas, which we're going to hop into right now. All right, so to help you navigate it, the toolkit itself is organized into 5 core sections. 4 of these sections focus on key implementation areas. Those are those 4 interconnected areas I was mentioning. So those are infrastructure, programming and family engagement, workforce capacity, and amplifying and sustaining the work through public policy and funding. Within each of those sections, we go deeper into some practical strategies. So for example, when we look at infrastructure, that's exploring approaches such as nature exploration areas in early childhood settings and in public spaces. So those can be 2 different practical strategies within infrastructure. And then the workforce capacity section looks at different strategies like high quality professional development, like strengthening the training pipeline, and how we're embedding the nature-based practices into existing systems. Each of those sections also looks at community examples, so you can see what that particular area looks like in action and what communities out there across the country are doing to bring these examples to life. In addition to those 4 implementation areas, the toolkit includes a foundational steps section. And what we've seen again in our work supporting communities is that this type of work, this systems level change, doesn't happen unless you really put in some early groundwork. So those are things like bringing together cross-sector partners across the city, creating a shared vision that you all are working together that serves as the North Star that you all continue to work towards, and understanding what system change really looks like within your local context. So that foundational step section really provides tools and resources to help communities begin that work and to build a strong foundation for whichever implementation area they choose to focus on first. So that hopefully gives you a sense of how the toolkit is organized. Now I'm going to very briefly highlight those 4 core implementation areas just to hopefully orient you a bit to what each one of them is designed to support, and then hopefully encourage you to get into the toolkit itself, dive in there, really pull apart everything that it has to offer there. We'll get started with the infrastructure section here. Oops, sorry, I just noticed. Let's go back 1 slide here. There we go. So the infrastructure section really focuses on expanding access to high quality outdoor learning environments. And we're looking at that in different locations, right? How are we providing those environments in early childhood education centers, as well as home-based care, and then shared public and community spaces, right? This is really about making sure that nature isn't just an occasional thing that children have access to, but again, that we're really embedding it into the environments where young children spend their time on a day-to-day basis. The next piece is programming and family engagement, and this really focuses on how those spaces are activated, right? So how are we using intentional outdoor learning, play, activities, meaningful caregiver involvement to activate those physical spaces? We know the spaces matter, being thoughtfully designed, offering these nature areas to children and families for them to access, but how they're used and who's included in how those spaces are used matters just as much as the physical environment. Workforce capacity focuses on building the confidence and skills of early childhood educators and family support professionals so that they can integrate nature into their daily practice. Again, those spaces really matter, but that impact really grows within educators and other adults when they feel equipped to use those spaces, right? So if we're bringing this to early child care centers, how are we providing those educators with the tools and resources they need to feel comfortable doing that? Again, this is looking at professional development, strengthening that pipeline, and how we're supporting embedding nature into existing systems like quality rating systems, early learning guidelines. And then the last piece here is the policy and the funding section. And this is really intended to address the broader systems conditions that shape what's possible within a city or community, right? So we're looking at those licensing components, the regulatory environments, long-term funding strategies, right? These are really powerful levers for expanding and then sustaining equitable access to nature over time. So together, these 4 areas that I just reviewed form the core implementation or the core focus of that toolkit. And just to wrap up the toolkit section on this, as you can see, there is a lot in here, kind of moving very quickly through all of that because we have a great panel that we want to get to. There's resource guides, there's case studies, there's implementation guidance in it. Again, this is really intended to be explored over time. It isn't about doing all of these pieces all at once, but looking at where there's energy within your community, where is there already alignment, where is there interest or momentum, and how can you build from there? And what we've seen is that over time, communities often expand into other areas as those partnerships strengthen, as the systems begin to shift, right? As you implement and work in one area, it becomes a little bit more possible and easy to move into those other areas as well. And it's that steady and layered growth is how we get to meaningful systems change. And the toolkit's really designed to support that kind of long-lasting, embedded, and integrated change. So, all right, with all of that in mind, we would love to show you what this looks like in practice. So I am going to turn it over to Vera now, who's going to share a few examples of communities bringing this work to life.
Hi, I'm Vera Feeney, Program Manager at the National League of Cities. Just highlighting a few community examples, but please explore the toolkit for more. And later we'll also hear from our panelists detailing how they're working to implement policy and practice in their communities and states. And the first community we want to highlight for their work in both infrastructure and family engagement is Boulder, Colorado, where they're working on creating Primos Park, a new community space designed for people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities, with a special focus on nature-based play. And partnering with Growing Up Boulder, the City of Boulder Parks and Recreation Department gathered input from children, teens, and caregivers, especially those living in the nearby Boulder Meadows manufactured home community. And through neighborhood events, Latino and Nepalese families shared their ideas for park activities, and children at the city's What's Up Boulder event added their visions through hands-on nature play and the storytelling tree. And using 2 years of community feedback, the city created a preliminary plan centered on flood-resilient biodiversity supporting design with play pods for all abilities. These encourage movement, fine motor play, creativity, social connection, and quiet reflection. And there are going to be further design refinements for this year. So a great multi-layered example from our wonderful Boulder team. And our next example comes from Nature Niños in Prescott, Arizona for Programming Plus Family Engagement. And Nature Niños Prescott is a bilingual initiative focused on improving equal access to parks and trails for Spanish and English-speaking families with young children through direct service policy and infrastructure change. And launched by the City of Prescott, Yavapai County Community Health Services, and the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension, it now includes more than 19 partners, from Arizona's Early Childhood Agency to Arizona's Children Association and local environmental nonprofits. And city park rangers and community partners lead monthly child-centered outdoor programs on family-friendly trails, featuring story times, activities, scavenger hunts, leave no trace lessons, along with healthy snacks for families to enjoy together. And the initiative has a strong social media presence and includes ideas for ways families can connect with nature on their own. And our last example comes from the Outdoor Learning Environments Texas Initiative, OLE Texas, for public policy, workforce, and professional development and infrastructure. And the Texas Department of State Health Services and statewide partners are leading the Texas Outdoor Learning Environment Initiative, also known as OLE Texas. And through this effort, they're transforming outdoor spaces at early childhood education sites while also strengthening workforce training across the state. And in partnership with the Texas Children in Nature Network, OLE Texas provides professional development through an outdoor learning environments network and a professional learning community that supports quality rating and improvement system, or QRIS standards. And these trainings focus on why outdoor play matters, how to design supportive outdoor learning environments, and ways to include nature-based learning in everyday routines. And by aligning with state standards and using trusted professional development providers, OLE Texas helps ensure that nature-based practices are accessible, relevant, and embedded across the early childhood system. So we hope these are just a few highlights, and we hope you'll explore the toolkit community examples for more. And I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks, Farah. Well, we're as a part of the toolkit, we have a whole great section on public policy. And one of our goals across the collaboration of the Outdoor Nature-Based Early Care and Education Collaborative, which is an initiative to really try and get the public sector to support outdoor nature-based early care and education. And it includes a variety of partners like National Start Alliance, Early Childhood Health Outdoors, National Institute of Early Education Research, and a whole bunch of other partners out there that are really on every level, whether you're talking federal, state, or local, to try and move policy, to move publicly funded professional development efforts, to look at your public plans like your city sustainability plan or your state environmental education plan and try and get nature-based early childhood and all those that support early childhood to really have the tools they need to have kids out in nature, learn from and have fun in nature, and hopefully to move some public resources in that direction. One of the things, go to the next slide, please. One of the things I'll put in chat is our Early Childhood Hub, which has a little bit about this collaborative as well as the toolkit and some other resources related to nature and early childhood. This collaborative includes public agencies, providers, national organizations, researchers, and others that are really trying to move together. And this includes some of those folks that have a climate change and sustainability framing. We do have our monthly update emails and bi-monthly policy calls and other working groups that are happening. Some are quarterly, some are monthly. If you are interested, just to give an example, the Birth to Three work group is really starting to figure out how we can highlight the importance of nature for new parents and guardians, and what does that look like in our different public funding streams and public programs. Federal policy is really going to be taking a look, and we are not taking a look. We are going to come up with a action plan for the new Congress when they get seated in 2027, and a bunch of other efforts, and would love to have you join us in that. But in order to get our minds wrapped around public policy, we have three amazing guests today because we want to have you all get a flavor for what we mean. And a lot of times when we're talking about public policy, I think there's an inclination to think of moving a bill through a legislative body, which, yes, is one part of public policy. But systems change really happens in all sorts of ways with all sorts of public initiatives and efforts and trying to get the right people in the right places to pay attention to this. So we have a really cool way to look at this at a state, county, city, and a city level for you here today. So we are going to start off with a little look at the state level with Ashley Hoffman from the Kentucky Association for Environmental Education, who's going to be talking about their legislation around outdoor childcare regulations. We then have Matt joining us from the Parks and Recreation Department at the City of Dubuque, Iowa, and some of their efforts, and Monica Brinkeroff from the United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. They're in Pima County. Each of these is a different way to think about engaging the public sector because there's no one way. And as we do this work and influence public policy, your entry points are going to look different depending on where you are in the country or in that case, where you are in the world, since we have some international guests on the phone today. But first off, I want to pass it over to Ashley Hoffman to tell us a bit about the advocacy and policy work happening from a state level lens in the great bluegrass state of Kentucky. Ashley.
Thanks, David. All right. Okay. Thanks, David. All right. So my name is Ashley Hoffman, and I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Association for Environmental Education. And we have really been working on addressing barriers for our outdoor nature-based preschool providers in our state. Um, we kind of got started down this path a couple years ago when we were working on a new strategic plan for our organization, and we did some community listening sessions virtually with different audiences. And we knew that we wanted to really address this as a pathway of learning from early childhood to adult. And so we had an early childhood listening session, and we heard a lot of feedback from that group, specifically around this barrier and that they're not able to reach all the audiences that they would like to reach because of the barriers to getting licensed in our state. And so we really hadn't done any advocacy work in our state prior to this. So this was all a new area for me. And so we started out by hosting outdoor receptions at the Capitol, which allowed us to meet some of our legislators. We worked in partnership with the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, which was so helpful because they knew what they were doing. They knew how to do these things, and really held our hand through that process. In the meantime, we worked on establishing a network of early childhood educators, specifically, working to understand what their needs were and how we could support that. And when this issue came up, we started to look at how we could address this. So we did approach the state agency staff in Kentucky and brought this to their attention, and wanted to see if we could pursue it in a non-legislative avenue. And we weren't successful there, but we learned a lot. We also started working with the Natural Start Alliance and the Children in Nature Network, and learned a lot about what other states were doing and the different pathways that they were taking. And what was really interesting was that everyone was taking different pathways in different states. So, we kept having the conversations and finally decided. We met a legislator at our outdoor reception last year who was really interested in pursuing this with us. And she was a Republican legislator, and they have the majority in the House and Senate here. So we worked with her to introduce legislation this year for the session. But prior to that, we kind of did some lead up work. We hosted a field trip with legislators, took them out to 3 of our different forest preschool sites, and gave them opportunity to see that in action. And it was great because it was the coldest day of the year and it was snowing, and they got to see that the kids were still outside having a great time. And the only ones who weren't dressed appropriately were our legislators. So we had a great field trip. They got to see that in action. We introduced the bill, and we've just had such great support for the first year. There's a lot of interest in Kentucky right now around early childhood regulation. So we actually were successful in our first year in getting some language into a House Joint Resolution that said that they would review the regulations for outdoor nature-based preschools. So that was really great. And our early childhood network that we started building has just been so amazing and so plugged in, and they've been contacting legislators left and right, and writing op-eds and doing all the things. So that it's been an amazing process to be a part of. And we've learned so much this past year, and yeah, I guess that's what we have to share. So we're still working on that. We're still in session here in Kentucky, so there's still a lot going on, but that's where we're at and kind of the pathway we've taken over the last 2 years.
Thanks, Ashley. Yes, and I believe we are now up to 6 states with outdoor nature-based childcare regulations. And we're learning a lot of this. If it passes, this would be the first sort of red state that is sort of engaging on this, and really excited to see what happens there. And now want to switch gears a little bit, and now more of a county level and an approach that's really looking at where are kids and how do we get nature wherever they're at. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica. What is happening in Southern Arizona?
All right. Thanks, David. And thanks so much for the opportunity to share our story. Our coalition really started with 3 partners in the summer of 2022. We had Pima County and then the United Way of Tucson and Prescott College Center for Nature in place. And we were working from, I'd say, an existing foundation of some really nice ingredients to make the perfect recipe. We had multiple providers here that were interested in kind of nature-based learning. We have tons of providers that implement a Reggio Emilia curriculum approach, which is a great place to start, and a very strong early childhood coalition. So through our participation with the Children in Nature Network, we knew that we needed data. And so we really started by connecting with our City of Tucson's Office of Equity, who developed this Children's Equity Nature Index for us. That was great. It gave us the data that we needed, and it confirmed what we already knew related to inequities. But even better than that, it kind of drilled down to some specific neighborhoods and helped us really hone in on where specifically we wanted to focus our efforts. Over time, and it was 2022, so almost 4 years ago now, our network continued to grow. So we've gone from 3 partners to, I think, over 30. We've got, University of Arizona, we have the Children's Museum, we have a desert museum, the zoo, school districts, early childhood providers, youth, and environmental education groups, climate justice groups, kind of really broadened the memberships of our coalition and really wove the relationships and the connections. And, I like to reference that water of systems change, framework, because as you'll hear, we really did a lot of building of the relationships and connections that helped us influence policies, and then also hopefully in time change mental models. So once we had the equity index, we were able to kind of think about how could we make decisions using using that data. And David mentioned that policy doesn't always necessarily mean legislation. It can be internal within an organization or even in a coalition. And so as an example, here at United Way, we have 3 funded programs through First Things First, which is our state's early childhood agency. So we have home visitation programs in conjunction with partners, family resource centers, and then a professional development approach or innovative approach for early childhood educators using communities of practice model with coaching. And so one thing that was kind of an easy thing to do in the beginning was to make decisions about how, what we were going to include in those different programs using existing funding. So, for example, we began integrating experiences for families for socialization time that were outdoors and run by an expert in nature-based experiences with families. We integrated similar experiences at the family resource centers, and then we added a community of practice that was specific to nature-based learning into our existing early childhood professional development grant. So again, it was really just sort of having some internal conversations, maybe a little bit of advocating to the funder, and making some of those small changes early on so we could use existing funding and we didn't necessarily have to secure new funds. We also were doing some work in outdoor learning environments and improvements. And so again, really just making some slight shifts in what that looks like to encourage the providers to think about how to incorporate more nature-based elements into their programs. Fast forward to, last year, this was one of our bigger policy wins, is we had a site visit with the National League of Cities and the Nature Everywhere team. And we invited local leaders into the room to really kind of, have a convening, talk about where we're at and where we wanted to go. And at the time, we were really focused on getting a Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights passed, which we're still working on that. And it happened that in the room, we had the Development Services Department from Pima County. And so they were right in the midst of getting input on their Pima Prospers plan. And because they were in the room that day and heard about what we were working on, they encouraged our coalition to provide feedback onto the plan. So the plan is our county's 10-year comprehensive plan for development in Pima County. And it, kind of highlights the interrelatedness of economic development, our diverse natural, physical, and cultural resources, and then our historical and existing built and social environments. So we thought it was a big win. Our feedback got written into that plan in the neighborhoods and communities section about ensuring access to nature and green spaces with special attention and focus on underserved communities. And then in the flood control and drainage section about designing green infrastructure to serve as native access points and environmental learning spaces for children. So seems like a few little small sentences, but it was so exciting for us to actually have the policy in place that might then influence future decisions. And then finally, our City of Tucson, which is a strong partner in our coalition, the City of Tucson Parks, they had some funding to make improvements to local parks. And so again, using the equity index, identified some neighborhoods that they wanted to focus on, and hosted a community engagement process focused on youth to have the youth inform the design and the plans for the improvement of the parks. And really, I think that's an example of the practices part of that systems change pyramid, of really changing how do we engage youth voice and how do we give them ideas about and examples about what incorporating nature might look like to them. So that's just kind of a quick summary of some of the things we have done, and we're continuing to work toward that Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights as a community, and have just been really honored to be part of this group and this effort. And I had asked David to share a ripple effect map that really tells the story of some of the things that we've seen happen in Pima County. So we're just excited to continue this work.
Thanks, Monica. Yes, put in the Children's Equity Nature Index they were using for their data, as well as a ripple effect map. And thanks. It's so cool to see this sort of finding its way into so many different efforts there. And in Dubuque, Iowa, they sort of started with a strategic partnership between Parks and Rec and a nature-based program, and it sort of grew, sprung out like a tree, into many other efforts there. So, Matt, would love to hear more about what is happening in Dubuque.
Thank you, David, and hello, everyone. Yeah, we're very excited about all that's evolving here, and I am relatively new to the position and to the conversation about the expansion of nature access here in Dubuque. Been on the job as the director for the Parks and Recreation Department with the city now for about 6 months, but really came into just an exciting level of development, and it's been a privilege to be part of helping to connect more of what was already in motion. And I think ours is a story about partnership and really maximizing the synergy between groups and between things that were already in motion in different places that we were able to bring together into a more focused effort. And that's really the first part of our example with strategic partnership with our local nature program, our Dubuque Nature Everywhere team, incredibly active and part of a incredible dynamic project that again was an expansion of something already happening between the city and their group and others who were really supporting this nature access, especially for youth, with the development of what I will call a early childhood and youth centered nature experience. And it's called Wonderwood Gardens, and it's adjacent to our city owned, partner operated Dubuque Arboretum. And so it was already a place people were looking at in terms of nature connection and unique experiences around nature. And then this was a step beyond that with this group that really had high motivation and just tremendous ability to garner support for something very specific to youth engagement. And so exciting new opportunity really coming online this year for the first time in Dubuque. And we're just all anxious to see how that integrates more youth into the nature-based experience here that's so important and popular. And we were actually able, and this was really, again, part of a tremendous lead up and convergence of opportunity with the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights being supported by our city council. And I had the privilege to take that to the finish line after some work by my predecessor, Marie Ware, who was the director here for 15 years and worked very closely with the Dubuque Nature Everywhere team on getting this into the public eye and winning over champions, not just at the council level, but with other nonprofits, with other impact groups in the community who are also supporting this. So there's a lot of, again, synergy around bringing those groups together to be talking about the same thing and using a lot of the same vernacular about the importance of things. So huge step forward there. And then the timing also integrating into philosophy of our department's Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It's the first comprehensive master plan for the Parks and Recreation Department in Dubuque. So just really the timing of everything lending itself to the power of all of these things happening together. We already had Dubuque County Conservation banging the drum and really championing things relative to their mission and cause. And to build off that, we already have a climate action plan and a sustainability office with the city that we pulled in as part of just somebody else who was really calling for this kind of action. So I don't know that our story is totally unique, but I definitely am appreciative of the fact that we were able to just bring together several things already in motion to focus into this power of really getting people to understand the importance of what we were advocating for. And the master plan and the foresight of Marie and some other people who were here prior to my coming alongside and being a champion moving forward for all of this, we're able to call out in the master plan a very specific chapter of the importance of nature, the management of the natural spaces we have, the integration of that into programming. And so that now that is a council approved document just less than about a week and a half ago, calling for those things and advocating for those things. And it's building off of all the work that was done prior to that coming to the finish line with the city council. But again, I love our success story in terms of using the energy and the commitment and the passion and the focus of people leading up to this time to just make it the most dynamic thing possible. And so our effort now with those things in place is how can we build more programming? How can we create diversity? How can we have people feel like this is more accessible than it's ever been? How can we have the multiple voices all promoting and calling for this kind of thing to be more prevalent, to have it be more available, and utilize this unique situation of just the combination of people working together to have this take a seismic step forward. And I think we're going to see that here in 2026 and beyond with the opening of that space, Wonderwood Gardens, the master plan being a prevalent part of conversations moving forward with the city council. It's a very tangible things that we'll be able to highlight to the community are the benefits of this kind of partnership. So we're really on the precipice of taking steps forward that I think will integrate and introduce the community who hasn't necessarily been a part of that at this point to the options and the opportunities. And it's just an incredibly exciting time here in Dubuque to be a part of that.
Thanks, Matt. And it goes to show like this can happen in all kinds of places, in all kinds of population sizes, with all sorts of agencies. And so one of the things, one question I have for you all, and we have just about 6, 7 minutes or so, but what has been some of the interesting collaborations or keys to success in this that maybe surprised you? And while you're thinking about that response, I'm going to go ahead and answer Renee's question live about the Academy of Pediatrics. And so this is just, and you're thinking about different allies and out there in the work. There has been some engagement. Several orgs, including some folks on the phone, have presented at American Academy of Pediatrics before. Project Nature in Washington State is led sort of from a pediatric lens, which provides support to new parents and helps them access parks and figure out what to do at parks. So there's little bits and fits of that partnership there, but certainly more that can be done. So in the vein of what surprised you all in this work and who are some partners that maybe you didn't anticipate really being supportive of this work? I'm just going to throw that question out to whoever wants to answer it.
I'll go first. I know I just finished up sharing, but what I'll say, I appreciated or was a surprise, but I was so thankful for, and maybe to what you were talking about, David, about the way opportunities present themselves. is despite all the intense work that everybody's already involved with, there was just an incredible openness when I started the conversation with people about this being important. I think it's never trivialize, how significant something can be to people, and where it can fit into the priorities. So I certainly encourage people to, even if you think somebody is maybe at their capacity or concerned about how any of these kind of initiatives could, take away from where they're already focusing. I think this really resonates, and I think this is something that carries a lot of importance and passion with people, and sometimes just the conversation to open the door. And so you think about the range of entities and the range of different governmental agencies or the contribution happening in our area. It's a long list, and I think people would be surprised to see that those kind of groups were all in support and all willing to come together. But it's a conversation worth having, and I certainly encourage that. If you even feel like people are on the fence, that dialogue can be a big help.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Matt just said is I think I didn't have any specific partners that surprised me in being champions. But what I was surprised about is I haven't yet had anyone that we've talked to about this say they're not interested. Everyone seems to have a connection. Everyone seems to be interested in it. And I've also just been kind of noticing as I'm speaking with people about how most people have a personal connection to this issue too. And so I think it really, it makes it almost a no-brainer. We had a convening on Monday, had several parents in the room who are thinking about this with their own children. So it just is a universal issue, and something that lots of people are hopping on board with. And then again, I just was amazed at the breadth of organizations and groups that are here in Tucson and Pima County that just easily tap into this. So it's been pretty amazing.
I guess I would just add as far as partners, for us, it was probably the legislators. Just, similar to what Monica said, we haven't had anyone that wasn't supportive. Every legislator we've approached has really been on board, and we've had a lot of bipartisan support for our work here. So that's been refreshing, and it was just really great to see something that could bring us together. So.
And one interesting thing in Kentucky too, actually, was the way that you kind of messaged outdoor nature-based childcare as being a way to expand access. Because in your state, maybe the environmental ed part might not be so popular, or might not be the messaging, but the messaging should just provide more options for families. Really sunk in, and I thought
Mhm.
that was a really good strategy, particularly if you're in a more conservative state or area.
Yeah, they definitely gave us some advice on how to change our messaging and kind of took it a little bit differently than how we'd previously been messaging it. So,
Great. Well, I'm about to hand it back over to Vera. Definitely want to thank our panel. And let me just say, for this collaborative, if you have a policy idea you've been considering, or you're just wondering what some of the options are, you want more in depth, I am happy, as well as many of our other national partners that we work with, are happy to meet with you and talk a little more specifically, and or connect you maybe to other people in your states and communities that are doing this work. And on that, I will hand it over to Vera.
Yes. So you might be wondering what are ways to stay in touch, and ways to be involved. So please contact David. His email is david@childreninnature.org. And we have ways, we have a mailing list with news about the outdoor nature-based ECE work. We have monthly calls, different committees, as well as these webinars and just other ways you could provide input. So we hope you will think of ways you can join us for, what works for you in your involvement. And we will also be sending out all the resources and slides in the recording from today, as well as a resource list. And let me see if I guess we have all our questions. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much to our panelists. And it was a great discussion.